Inshallah and Ashe. Blessings to you, my energetic beings. Welcome to Meet Me for Coffee. I'm super excited to be here today. I bring on a guest that has adventured into the realm of creating an empowered spirit tarot deck. She's created this exciting and new way to open up to the very idea of tarot reading during the 2020 lockdown, I might say. Questions were coming in of different insights, it sounds like. And like a lot of us during 2020, she actually noticed that to listen to the media and even the news, it really wasn't possible to get the answers because there was too much opposition or duality in those conversations in the narrative or the story. So she sat down and figured out a way out of it, just looking deeper into this whole creative process through, I sense, meditation and just allowing her intuition to actually be her guide and her light. So with that, welcome, Terri. Can you share some of your light into this creation of this empowering journey that you went on?
Yes, thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely.
2020 was very troubling for a lot of us. We didn't really know what to do, and there was so much of this news going on, and many people were glued to the TV, and then one day, one thing, another day, another thing. Finally, I just said, turn it off. Turn it off. And my background is in the arts, fine arts, and into the healing arts now, but that's always been a process for me. Like, okay, I've got to find some better answers. I had closed my physical studio. All right, everything was closing down. I was part of a yoga studio here in Birmingham, and so like everything around us, we were closing, we couldn't work and, in the physical form in person. And so I kind of brought everything to my home, which I had actually just moved into about a year ago. And so there was still like space around. And so just kind of reorganizing my life. And like you said, taking that time to just I have to go within. Like I have to get really quiet. And so I kept noticing I was pulling out my tarot cards to ask questions like, okay, show me this, show me that, show me this, and show me that. And it really enabled me to journal a little bit more, to ask deeper questions. Oh, like, I didn't think about that. Let's see what that's about. And so that's what the tarot does. I like to say it's like having a therapy session with your spirit. You sit down, you get quiet, and you ask those questions because really, ultimately, we are the ones in control of our decisions, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I always, I'll sit down with myself and literally have a heart-to-heart conversation with my spirit space, my higher self, my personal self. And, I always collaborate with greater spirit, God, universe, whatever that looks like for each and every one of us. I think it's unique on all those levels. But I feel and I sense that the 2020 experience was really about human beings as a collective, literally climbing back into their skin and hopefully, getting more into their heart space.
Yeah, I agree. And that creative process brings you into a different part of your brain. It really does. And I went through major trauma back in the late 90s. And one of the things I will always say that kind of saved my life is making jewelry. I was making crystal jewelry and just started working with that whole energy, which led me to have my hands blessed by these shamans. I was making these little beautiful bags for Eileen Fisher stores. They were peyote stitch, ancient technique, and they blessed my hands. And I really feel like that sent me to my first teacher, my first spiritual teacher. And then from there, just so much change. But I've said often, like when nothing seems to be working, go back to sitting down and making jewelry, go back to that creative process. And so that's kind of what the tarot was. I admit, Tonya, I have a really big open mind. Like I've got that creative mind. Sometimes I can be all over the place. And the tarot just helped me kind of narrow down, spend some time, narrow down on specific questions because I can kind of jump around sometimes. Even through meditation, it just kind of helps me, okay, present, settle, what's going on inside. And so that's what I found the tarot to be so helpful with. And of course, I have so many decks, but they're just beautiful images and they help us to really stay in the moment. So I draw a card, I do a little writing, and then I would even allow that energy to kind of keep me going through the day. Like, okay, where do I see these signs? Where are they showing up? What did I hear? What did I notice? And I really found it gave me so much guidance. It really did. And so one day I just picked up the phone. It was a friend of mine, actually it was one of my students from my Empowered Spirit. I do private mentoring, teaching people how to create a spiritual practice. And it was her birthday or something. And we were just chatting, and I've always loved her artwork. We've done some art shows together, and she had a beautiful Ganesha in the yoga studio and all. And so we were just chatting. She also takes women on hikes, women my age, on hikes across the Alps. So she's a really interesting and amazing woman. Lori Henn is her name. And she happened to mention she was doing some art, and she was kind of looking for a spiritual art project. And I'm like, well, I've been wanting to make a tarot deck. I really have. I have so many teachings, and I feel like using this work can help other people. And I love art, and I love to especially support people in the healing arts as well. I just think we all need that kind of support. And so she didn't really know the tarot. And we thought about tarot, oracles, and I do both, and I teach both because the oracles are a little different. But I really love the tarot. I've been studying them for years and years and years, and they are a lifelong study. They really are. So I said, you know what? Let's just do the tarot. And because the tarot has a format, every tarot deck, they could be different, but they have the main foundation, which is the 78 cards, the 4 suits. They have the major, the minor, and they have what they call the people cards. So we kind of adapted that. I adapted that to the way in which I work. Like my jewelry was started out on the 4 elements, fire, earth, and water, spirit being the 5th element. So that's kind of where I worked with that. And then we took that as the suits. So traditional decks have pentacles, wands, swords, and cups. Thank you. Yeah. And so we changed it to the elements of what they represent, the fire, air, earth, and water. And then we also changed the people cards. And this has been very interesting for the deck. Instead of the king, queen, knight, and page, we'd use mother, father, sister, mother, father, brother, mother, father, daughter, son, because of the family dynamics. And I will tell you, when those start coming up, it's the opportunity to talk about what is the family dynamics.
So literally, I just got chills. And what literally just landed was like the ancestors, right?
Yeah.
So I sense also, like in a past life, you probably were more of an oracle kind of tarot reader, and you had that magic then, and you're bringing it back in with a more innovative perspective to like shift that dynamic.
Yeah, if you actually look up like what is an oracle, it actually does go back to a person who was able to deliver these messages. And then as time came forward, it changed to like a tool to bring messages forward. And then now we have the oracle cards, the tarot cards. We also have like the I Ching and the runes and other means. There are other means of working with divination. But I kind of agree. I think there's an inherent knowledge or wisdom that I bring forward. And the work that I do, we look at that sometimes. Like, what are some of those past life energies that come forward, especially when things just feel like so familiar, like I just know this. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is a study. Yeah, it is a study, the tarot. Yeah.
So can you show us some images of some of what the cards look like?
Yeah. And I have to say, I'm playing a really fun game on Instagram right now of Who Am I? And every day coming on with the archetypes and then revealing the cards. So here's the background, which actually we put together, unbeknownst to Lori. This is actually the wish card. This is actually from the 9 of water, 9 of cups, which is the wish card in the tarot. But we used it as the background with the hands giving. Now, one of the things that's already different on the card is that generally the backs of your tarot cards are symmetrical. Like there's not a up and down. And this one actually, like this is the upright. So I know that's some people are going to go, ooh, but I like it because to me, I always hold my cards in a certain way. And it just like helps me to then go, okay, whatever comes up, comes up. Right. And so that first card turns up. So we'll see. But some people may, like, oh, that's really different. So I think even if you hold them and you see it's reversed, it's okay too. So that's one of the differences is that there is like, okay, let's start. I feel like that's what helps us to get organized. And then we go through, I love them. They're really just very unique. Let's see here. Here's the strength card, which is kind of based on the traditional where she sits on the lion, that infinite potential.
Oh, I love that. Wow. Yeah.
So lots of times I teach for clairvoyance, I teach people how to visualize, and we use roses. We practice seeing and releasing roses. So roses are very big in the deck. And then her just own impression. Like here's one that is a very troublesome one, drama, the air, that's the mental. So it's like, yeah, you're keeping yourself up at night with all the drama, all the mental capacity. So that's the mind, right? That kind of thing. Let's see. The Fool is still one of my favorites. And there was sometimes like even the Fool, like, no, let's make her a woman. She looks too much like a man. And the fun thing was that Lori would just like change one thing, like maybe even add like one little line and the whole perspective would change, which was really amazing, that ability to do that. Here's the Empress.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah. So they're just beautiful. Some are very representative of like the traditional Rider-Waite deck. Pamela Smith was the artist for that deck. And some of them are not at all, so I think that's fun. Here's a favorite is the Moon.
Well, who doesn't love the moon? We just had that magical solar eclipse, like actually today, this morning.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is a really fun deck. The colors are just beautiful. Well, you'll appreciate that, right? They just all kind of fit in. They're very vivid. The watercolor. Here's the High Priestess, which is kind of what I've been feeling like these last few days with all this energy.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I love the story that you just kind of feel into the deck every morning and pick a card for the day to day.
Yeah. And that's a good way to learn it. That's a good way to learn the tarot, learn what keeps coming up. Some people say, well, don't put it back, keep going if you want to learn it. But it's like, just keep pulling it. Because lots of times you'll see repeat cards coming up. I just had that. Okay, well, maybe you didn't pay attention. But it is a good way to kind of look at what's going on in your day. It really is. And then sometimes I'll do a clarity spread, which is 4 cards. So the first card is like, okay, show me what's blocking me. I can't figure this out. And then 3 other cards to help. And I like to use it in like a story. Instead of just reading per card, I like to create the story that weaves all those cards together. And I think the story, especially if you're working with a client, is what helps people to relate. And then it helps open up their stories. Because you know what? Most people think, not most, but a lot of people think that the tarot is supposed to be like secret. Like I'm not supposed to say anything. And I read at this cute little store here locally, and I read on Wednesdays. And so some people have never had a card reading. And so you can hear them kind of on the outside because I have a little cute little area. But sometimes they'll come in and they'll be like zip mouth and they won't say anything. And they think you're going to like pull all the secrets out of them or just blurt all the information. But really, it's a conversation. And it's like talking about the stories in your life, talking about those adventures. And the more that you share with any tarot reading, really, right, or any kind of reading, the more that's going to come back and keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So I like it to be interactive. That's kind of like I said, it's like a therapy session with your spirit because you're like, oh, I didn't really see that, and I always say if the cards come up, well, you have to talk about it, right? So to me, that makes it more of your own. It's not like I'm taking your power. Many people think like, oh, she's going to predict something bad. That's not the way I work with it at all. And maybe there was a point when people kept it mysterious, a while ago, people kept it mysterious and you have to be gifted and you can't just take any card and don't touch my cards. And so a lot of this kept it, I think, very mysterious. And kept it a little isolated from people, And I think we've all had that experience. And I talk about this too. Like the first card one time when I was just getting my first deck and learning was the death card. Scared the out of me because I didn't know. I thought it was a physical death. Oh no, somebody's coming. When that's not what the death card is about. It's more of a transformation, a shedding of a part of you, but it's not necessarily, in most cases, not a physical death at all. But it scared me. And I've heard this now talking to people about it. They've had the same thing where they close the deck, throw it out. No, I'll never go again. Right. And it took me about probably another 10 years. And I was going through a major transformation in my life. 40th birthday, someone actually did gift me a deck, the Mother Peace deck, which is a beautiful round deck. And they're just very loving and very peaceful. And that actually got me back into it. And then from there, I was living in New York. I started taking classes at Edgar Cayce Center and just various teachers along the way and just kind of learning. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. And I also love, like, I probably have 20 decks myself and I keep adding. It's just so fun. I mean,
it is fun. Yeah.
They each have their own exactly characters at play in their narrative and you pick up on different things. And also when I do cowrie shell divination, the Dagara method to read, it's the same, they get a little nervous because they're putting their energy in the stones as they swirl them around. And then the story plays out, right? It's like the swirl of magic. So, and it's perception, I prefer to go, shifting the perspective or into the optimistic instead of going down the rabbit hole. It's like, wait a minute, this is an energetic hiccup. Like, for example, a friend of mine just got let go from her job yesterday. And I was like, oh, the universe is moving you. It just opened the door for something good and gooder, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I'm more of that kind of reader too. Like, let's look at where the contrasts are and what we can do to, turn that around and look at what's underneath it. Where does it open the energy? I'm definitely more of that reader, but I like to get readings from other people too, but sometimes there are people who I feel like, they take that negative slant, or they're telling you the doom in your life. And like, I don't really know if I like that kind of reading. And so you do have to be careful who you get readings from, because you're the one that has the control of it. Right. And so I agree with you on that too. Let's open the energy. Let's not close it down. Let's open the energy. Now, I will say, if the cards come up, sometimes I have had to have difficult conversations, but I also think it's the delivery, because sometimes, not only do I read cards, but I'm an intuitive, and sometimes so much information comes forward, and, sometimes you'll get it like, okay, they're not quite ready for this. Like, let's keep working with them, but we start to look at the energy for them. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And I see this a lot, I guess partly too, because my whole story comes from, major divorce and living in New York and all of that. And so lots of times I get people who are going through relationship troubles. Right. And so sometimes I can see like, okay, this is not going anywhere, but sometimes people aren't ready to hear that. So I think that letting the cards come up and saying, okay, what's going on in this relationship, and let them start to see that. So I will talk about cards sometimes that are hard, but I do think the delivery and how you work with somebody is really important, just like any other therapist, just like that responsibility that we all have as a therapist. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of look at them as energetic hiccups, and sometimes they're trivial pursuits, to where if we look through, different eyes, it kind of assists in like, oh, you have that whole shift in the story not being such a tragedy, right?
Yes, exactly. And you know what? That's where many of the lessons I learned too. Divorce was very hard in my life, but now as I look back on it, it just taught me so much about where my power was going and how I was giving away so much of me. And I was living an old model, I was born in the late 50s, and our generation was different at that time. And I was really not so prepared to be a single woman in New York, so we meet people that come our way to help us move through stuff. And that's exactly what happened. And I believe that the tarot really, and the intuitive work and the spiritual counseling I did, that really is what got me going and learning so much more about myself and doing this work. And which is why it has empowered me to help other people too. I don't want people to be where I was. I don't want people to feel like they have no choice in life and depending on other people, especially, not to bash men, but especially to depend on a man in my life. I just don't want to do that anymore. Right. And I've seen the shifts, and I know that I carried on my mother's imprint, right? Talking about generational energies, I carried on hers, but I started to break that imprint. I really did. And now I can see it through my daughter. I can see the shifts and the changes and how much more strong she is in the workplace and her relationships. And I know part of it's like, I don't want to be like mom in that respect, but yet, the other things come through. Let me ask the questions. Let me stand up for myself. Let me feel empowered. And so I pretty much retired from my photography job in New York. I worked for great designers in New York, jewelry and tabletop, and now do this work full time, because that's how empowered I feel this work can make you be, especially if you feel lost or going through transitions or crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it opens up your heart. Right?
Definitely.
So
It
the
does.
heart knows. For me, it's like, what does my heart say about it? And I really don't get into what my mind thinks about it till I feel into it. And then, what do I believe about it? And I go through a whole process on the day-to-day kind of thing. So I really like the idea of the card for the day and paying attention to the signs. So for me, like, I do ritual every morning. I sleep outside, literally outside in a corridor of nature. I all summer long, that's like my healing venue for my personal self. And I just sit and I listen and tune into the frequencies of nature and the birds and butterflies and all the other magical beings out there. And then, like, sitting in space for the day, like, what's the day feel like? Or, I go through the whole thing. I don't listen to music in my car. I like the quiet. I like nature, just for that awareness and frequenting into that frequency.
Yeah, I agree. I work with a medicine wheel and have some property about 50 minutes from my home. And I just love it. And we go up there on the weekends and just, we have one of those tents where you can see the stars. And it's just like you wake up at night, like, oh my God, look at the moon. Look at it. So yeah, I hear you on that. And that's actually where I'm going. I mean, I feel like, as my retirement comes around, my real retirement comes around, like it's going to be to create that retreat space that can help people get out in nature. And exactly what you're saying too, like learn to listen, and it takes me an hour or so when I get out there to put the phone down, to quit checking email, which is like just so stupid, but it's a habit. And it's like that mass consciousness of always busy, always busy, always busy, and that hum of living around all the electromagnetic fields and all. So when we get out in nature, it's like, okay, sit, quiet, and it does. It takes me a little bit of time. And then, of course, I never want to leave, right? But I do feel like that is kind of where some of, me leaving my studio during COVID and not going back there right now and working at home. And actually I've created a beautiful sacred space in my backyard, like a spiral walk and a replica of a medicine wheel to sit and be quiet, and doing some fire circles here. So a lot of that has come about too by having some extra time here. So yeah, definitely we all need that, I think.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that your heart would love to share with my audience?
Well, I think that one of the things that this project has done for me is to really allow me to stand fully in who I am. So I left Birmingham in the 70s because I could and went off to college, and then wound up in New York City and lived in New York City, did all my training, and then came back here almost 10 years ago now to help my parents. And one of the things many things I did was not tell everybody exactly what I did. Right. So I was already doing Reiki, and I'm an interfaith minister of spiritual counseling. So I left a Jewish girl from the South and came back and like, you're a what? Like nobody really knew, like, where's your church? Like, no, 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 no. That's not really what I'm talking about. I work in spirituality. So I didn't mention that I read tarot cards because people are like, you can't do that. It's the devil's work. It's bad. It's the occult. It's witches, and it's like, so for the longest time, I never mentioned it. That wasn't on my menu of items that I did, but I always used it in my private clients when they came in, and we'd look at the cards that way. And so recently, well, I guess it was last year, right before COVID, I was in a car wreck and I got T-boned, and I wouldn't say I had a near death experience, but I definitely left my body. And when I came back, it was like, you still have more work to do. Are you showing up for this? Like, and that really just kept me thinking, like, what was that? Oh my gosh. And, doing the work that we were doing, recently in our groups, it's like, what? It's like, okay, I think I finished out a spiritual contract and just started a new one. So I think part of it is like saying, you know what, here we are, especially going through the eclipse and all day, like, here we are, it's time to move out of the comfort zone. And it's really time to open up to the entire part of who you are. So whether you're working in corporate America, you can still use the card. You can still have crystals. You don't have to hide them in your desk. And especially here in the South, like, we can talk about this. We can talk about this. The devil hasn't come and gotten me. It's not going to hurt you. And it just opens you up more to that spiritual part of who you are. And so that's part of the incentive for really coming out and talking about the work and trying to change some of that, myths about the tarot being, you lose your control and they're going to tell you bad things, or witches work. I mean, that's really big right now for people to say that around here anyway. So that's part of it. And that's the message too, that there are so many ways that you can tap into your own spirituality. Whether you want to use tarot or not is really not the point, but it is another way to access that information. But that's where your power is. And I think, again, going back to the whole idea, there's so much information, and here we are trying to go back out in the world. Like, who are you listening to? And you're the one that really knows best. And sometimes, kind of like I was saying before, like sometimes we all have busy minds. And I'm one to say, I do have a monkey mind. I'm a creative mind. So sometimes it wanders. So sometimes having those tools and those techniques to center our energy and have that one pointed focus is really important. And I think these tools can really help you. Definitely.
Yeah, I feel like it brings you back to your own sacred space, your own personal container first.
Definitely.
And it is true. Like, when people see my cowrie shell divinations on different social medias, I've had people actually message me, in a negative light. And, I just allow God universe to shift that transmission, because that's really their story, not mine. That's their trigger, that maybe they're not being authentic to their soul story and their whatever perspective. For me, it's literally is an energetic hiccup, because it's like their alert system to have a negative comment, it's like, oh, this really isn't about me so much. It's more about you working through your healing to get you on your pathway. So, and yeah, as far as like what you said about like, I came up with holistic shamedium because I incorporate shamanism and mediumship in the holistic container for, and different tools. I don't just use the cowrie shells. I work with different energetic tools that were just called to me through time and space from my childhood forward. So, I mean, it's like you're kind of circling back to your roots in a way and shifting that whole paradigm from home, your original home, right? At least in this earth journey.
Yeah, at least in this earth journey, definitely coming back home, coming back to the roots of who I am and showing up fully too, and just taking that stance at like, okay, you know what? And you reminded me like early on when I was back here, I did get a bunch of hate mail. There's a publication, Natural Awakenings here, and I was doing some advertising and I was kind of one of the first ones around here. And I did get some hate mail, and we actually had to go to the post office to stop it because it was getting to be ridiculous. But it does happen. But that I don't think should allow me to not show up or anybody else not to show up. Right. And okay, everybody has the right to say what they want, but I'm not hurting anybody. And my goal is to help people, to empower people. So there's nothing wrong about the work I'm doing. And you know what? Not everything is for me either. So I think we have to have that open mind and that empathic nature for everybody. Right. And so if it's not, go on. There's plenty of things. Keep scrolling. Right. But if you are interested and want to learn more about your own self, especially at a time that we all need this, then it's available to you for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I just like I said, I call them energetic hiccups or trivial pursuits. It's like, oh, that's a trick. Like it's an alert signal to me, like, oh, of what aspect in their consciousness needs some healing addressed or some forgiveness, anger, whatever emotion that's coming up. It's like, why is that coming up? Instead of having it come on me, it's like, oh, it's just an alert signal energetically.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so for me, it's given me a lot more courage just to stand up and say, this is what I do. And this is the complete part of who I am. And I fought the idea of woo, no, it's not woo, okay. So what? Maybe it is woo. Maybe part of it's woo. Right. But when you have that moment when everything is just like right there and you get this message and it's like this aha moment and you feel like that depth of your life, it's woo. It's good. You're in alignment. Spirit's talking, however you want to look at it. But I have to say it does. It feels good. You feel it in your heart. And it just like, yeah.
Yeah. It becomes like nature. It's this natural transformation. And then you get into the flow, the passion's there. You manifest it into the flesh in a way, right?
Exactly.
And then it's, out and actually creating that container, your tribe, your village that's on the same frequency or maybe needs some assistance. And you're there to get them in their own natural organic flow.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And lately, partly because of the deck, just to kind of get more visibility around it, and partly because I don't have a studio anymore, doing pop-ups around here in Birmingham. And there's a cute little shop in Homewood here in Birmingham. And she does tarot readings every single day. You can go in, she puts a sign out. And so it's been very interesting hearing the comments from people that don't want a reading, and then those that are coming in and having no idea what to expect. So I have been finding it quite fascinating and just listening to people's stories as well. I love it. It goes both ways. It really does. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. To get into flow.
So we are actually doing a crowdfunding campaign because the printing costs. So the deck is already published and it's already been shot. We had to shoot it digitally. That's where I relied on my photography experience. We shot all the artwork digitally and we've sent off for the first prototype. There's actually a little booklet that comes with it too, but we're actually doing an Indiegogo campaign. So you can actually help us by pre-ordering, and they're all at discounted prices, the discounted price of the deck, and you can get a reading in the deck. I'm actually doing a class in August. You can get a study book. You can get some of the artwork. Laurie is having G Clay prints of some of the best artwork that we love. And just a fun way to get in on the help, get in on the prices and feel like you're supporting and actually, allowing this to come more out into the public's view as well. So that's been a fun aspect of it too. And just helping us to really also get visible with it.
Absolutely. And just for my audience, just so you know, I'm going to have all of Terri's links so you can participate in this magical journey in the show notes. You can just probably just mention Meet Me for Coffee, Tonya D, and she'll know. But yeah, I'll for sure have all the information where you can connect with her in the show notes, and we'll share this out into the public as well.
Yes, thank you so much for that.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me for today and sharing your light.
Thank you.
And I will see you on the other side, inshallah, Ashe.
All right, to your spirit.